the ease of use of Schoology and the ability for us to bring everything together under one umbrella really changed the game for us.
Well, it certainly is an interesting time to be in education with the pandemic. And so I wanted to, I guess, start there is just understand, what Parkway has been doing with virtual schools during the pandemic. And how has this changed really what you've been doing in that arena for Parkway?
We basically went from everybody coming to school to a full virtual environment in about 8 days. And so we had to, kind of make that shift and figure out how that was going to happen and communicate that out to our families and our staff and our teachers. So that was kind of the beginning. From there, we really spent a lot of time supporting teachers and families in how to use, how to implement technology in the best way and how to really teach in a virtual setting and not just try to recreate our physical classrooms in a virtual setting. And that was a big shift that we had to take, but we offered lots of professional development along the way. We offered support. We hired some additional people just to support teachers in their virtual environments. And then we also tried to support our parents and our students, both with technology, with devices, and in some cases with access to the internet, but also with just how do you manage this time and how do you manage it in a tech-rich virtual environment where everything suddenly had to be online and everything, kids were basically accessing all of their information virtually. And in some cases that was asynchronous, where kids would log on, kind of as they could. And in other cases that was synchronous. And we tried to connect kids and keep them connected to their school, to their buildings, and to their teachers, and as well as classmates and friends along the way. So that was really, our response. We've done lots of different things, but that was our goal along the way, is just to make sure that our community was prepared to do this, whether it was a temporary situation or whether it was a long-term, as we have found ourselves in, and really respond to the needs of our community in that way.
How is the collaboration working among your teachers and your staff? How are you leveraging the technology maybe to make that happen?
We really had to focus on sharing our resources and sharing our ideas and thoughts. And one of the things that personally I worked a lot on is how do we highlight teachers and get those teacher stories out to other teachers and give them an opportunity to share with each other and provide that collaboration time. So one of the things we did early on was every Friday for probably the rest of our last semester last year, so 6 weeks or so, we had fully online learning for teachers. We didn't have kids come to school on Fridays. We had teachers who were teaching each other classes and giving them an opportunity to share their stories. Because it was one of those things that regardless of what, at the district level I've done, I've never taught in a pandemic. I've done lots of teaching online, but I never taught in that kind of environment. And so we really wanted to highlight those teachers who were being innovative and doing it well and had tips and tricks that they could share with their fellow teachers. And so the collaboration came in there, as well as just, providing a common space to share resources along the way. For us, that common space was in two places. It was in Schoology and it was in Google. And so those two places provided us the platforms in which for teachers to share their ideas, their resources, and their teaching practices along the way.
There's been a lot of concern, as all of us have gone through this pandemic, about the social emotional health for our students and our teachers and really our wider educators. How are you guys approaching that in your school?
Well, we do have resources and we do have teachers and we do monitor our people, whether those are little people or big people. We really try to make sure that everybody is taking care of themselves. And in a lot of cases, that means providing and letting them know it's not enough just to have resources, but we have to let them know that those resources exist. and communicate that out. So it's been a lot of communication, a lot of monitoring, and a lot of creating opportunities to connect with each other in ways that aren't necessarily, classroom ways, in teaching ways, but really personal ways.
Maybe you could share a little bit about how you guys are monitoring your um, your staff and your students.
It's a very site-based in terms of the approach, but some examples of what people are doing is they have weekly check-ins, and sometimes those are by department, and where a principal will check in with department leaders, who in turn are checking in with the people in their department. In
Mm.
other cases, I know at the high school, in terms of checking in with kids, we have counselors that will send um, basically a form out, a survey out to families and not just kids, to find it, to ask parents, what is your kid need? What do you see going on in there? And a lot of times it's supposed to be fast check boxes. Here are the behaviors that I see with my kids, and those aren't just negative behaviors, right? It's not just the things that we see as being, like kids withdrawn and things like that. Do your kids have a trusted adult in their school that they could go to, and providing teachers then the opportunity to connect with individual students on a regular basis. Um, so those are just some examples, but there are lots of different ways that we really were trying to gather information in order to respond to that information. And we use the traditional techniques like grades and attendance and things of that nature, but we really were a little more intentional about going beyond just what our regular in-person measurements would be, because we don't necessarily see those kids every day and have that relationship like we normally would.
I'm just curious, like having been using Schoology prior to the pandemic and now using Schoology during a virtual world of education. What are your thoughts? Like, how much of an impact do you think having some of that experience pre-COVID,
Yeah.
and kind of how do you think about technology maybe differently? I know that as I've talked to other customers, a lot of times technology was sort of an enabler part of the time, but it's has a different role now, and I'd love to know your perspective on that.
With our experience with Schoology, we had implemented our LMS years ago. I mean, it's been 6 years now that we've worked with Schoology, and so we had that LMS already set up. We had materials already created, we had trainings already done, we had relationships already built, we had people in schools who had already been using it in really significant ways, who could help lead their school. And so, like, our groundwork, our foundation was already set. And so when we had to shift, the shift was more in terms of, we want to make sure that Schoology is our hub of everything, so that parents have one place to go, as opposed to, we're going to go to this site and then this site and then this site. That was one of the things we heard from our community early on. There's just too many places. So we streamlined everything, and that's what Schoology really allowed us to do, is streamline our approach to instruction, our approach to resources, and give our families and communities opportunities to really be able to find the things that they needed at the time of need. And that's really the key for us.
Bill, I want to thank you so much for sitting down with us and spending some time and sharing your story and what you're doing at Parkway. Just phenomenal, I think, experiences and best practices that you guys have put in place. And I'm sure that the rest of the PowerSchool community will benefit from hearing from you. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.